I'm about to show you something that no one else in the world has seen yet.
If you've known somebody who has that epiphany, the moment after that epiphany, it all becomes about that thing. And for him, when he had that epiphany, it just became single-minded obsession until he could achieve that.
Jason Snell here with Joshua Michael Stern, the director of Jobs.
Yes.
Thanks for taking the time.
Thank you.
So my first question for you is, I know the movie's called Jobs, but in some ways it seems to be as much about the story of Apple. It's almost like a biography of Apple as it is a story about Steve Jobs.
It really is, but they're sort of inextricably linked together, and that's what the movie for me was really about. It was about how Jobs really identified himself through his product. And he found that sort of epiphany when he was younger, and once he had that epiphany, he spent the next 30 years trying to achieve it against all odds. And I think even later in life, he identified himself through the product. And that was what the movie was about, him and his company that were linked. And even that period when he was fired, you know, being sort of torn away from part of who he was. So when he came back after having had time to really, you know, think about what he could do to regain it, it was so important to, you know, come back and become whole again.
Lots of great actors in this movie, in smaller parts. J.K. Simmons as, he's sort of a villain, but really he's more the voice of the business as usual, right? And that clashes with Steve Jobs horrendously.
And he was the voice of a lot of people at that time. A lot of the people in the industry who were really, you know, pushing back on what Jobs was doing, you know, and the way that he was doing it. I mean, he was this guy who came in barefoot and kind of smelly and kind of ragtag in the late 70s when there was an IBM culture, which was still kind of an old, you know, an old boys sort of backroom club, you know, that, you know, it was a very different environment that he was sort of brought into. And I think for him, it was, you know, really about how do I get through to them.
I think people might be a little surprised. I mean, your movie poster has got kind of psychedelic colors on it. This is, we might think of Steve Jobs as we knew him in the 2000s, but this is a period piece. It's mostly in the 70s and 80s that
it's
this
prehistory.
movie goes on.
It's a prehistory movie. It's everything that happened before the iMac. To me, the iMac, that Bondi blue, pod-like translucent, and then of course the clamshell, you know, laptop that followed it, were where most people identified the beginning of Mac.
Right.
Most people, especially 25 and, you know, under. So this was really everything that brought him to be able to bring that to the world. It was prehistory in some regard. His whole story to me was almost Shakespearean, which is what drew me dramatically to it. I mean, he was raised by parents who were not his own, lower middle, you know, middle class people who loved him very much, working class people who but he always thought he was better than that environment that he was in. Not better than that environment, but bigger than that environment.
Right.
He met sort of a ragtag bunch of guys.
Great stuff.
Right?
With
Woz. Yeah. Wasn't Gag great?
Chris Espinosa is good.
I know.
Nice having met him before. That was fun to see him up on the screen.
He saw the movie.
Ron Eldard is great. By the way, motorcycle riding electrical engineer, fantastic. What is Steve Jobs' story arc? It seems to me that he has these moments, he drops acid, he's got these moments of revelation about the world, about products, about people, and then in some ways, is it a fall from grace? I mean, it seems that in some ways when he leaves, he is at bottom and he's not lived up to his ideals when you go from the 70s to the 80s.
It's really just about the fact that, like, when you have a religious epiphany, and if you've known somebody who has that epiphany, the moment after that epiphany, it all becomes about that thing. And for him, when he had that epiphany, it just became single-minded obsession until he could achieve that.
How do you portray technological innovation? The Mac story, a lot of that is software and things that are just not dramatic on screen. So how do you portray that? How do you try to dramatize something that's, I think, undramatic fundamentally?
Well, I mean, it is. Well, first of all, I love the fact that people don't realize the beginning of Mac. It's like the Iron Age. I mean, it was soldering, it was metal and fire. I mean, you know, that's what was interesting to me. And then when he got into the Mac, you dramatize it through his passion. You know, it was really about the man and how did he achieve it? How was he able to bring this obsession into a business that succeeded? You know.
So I wanted to talk a little bit more about the period, just because as a director, it's got to be watching the movie. I'm thinking, you've got to be at least close to the feeling of the period of the 70s and then the 80s.
Well, the fact that we are a period piece on a very small budget was extremely challenging. You hit on the most challenging part of the movie, was getting that right. But we really learned where to put our money. For example, the 1977 computer fair. I mean, that was for me.
That whole room is 1977.
It was 1977. And it was a moment in the film where usually as a director you're sort of objectifying the moment, you're outside of it. But that was a moment I felt completely inside. I mean, everything, the Commodore computers, like the extras, Ashton looks so much like Steve in that moment. This was a period movie. This was a movie about a time, the end of an era. I mean, and it's also about the people who lived in that era. It's like the early 70s, mid 70s are defined by free love and consciousness and all that, but there's also the people who the ripple effect of that with the people out in the suburbs who were in their garages, who were not, partaking of free love and all that. They were in there actually thinking and creating things and, sort of basically triggering the new industrial revolution. Also, the challenge was that Steve spent most of his life inside of an office park. I mean, he never lived further than 8 or 9 miles from where he was born. And he lived in these big windowless spaceships. For the most part, it was really not very interesting set design.
I love the Jobs house, though. The Jobs house, and you get that street that they're on, and the cars pull up.
And that's his real house.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. We shot in the house that Jobs grew up in. His stepmother, it was owned by his father and his stepmother, his father has passed away. The stepmother reached out to the production, and we shot in that. The garage in the movie is the garage that he and Woz and all of them made. We didn't change a thing.
Amazing. I had no
except
idea.
For one shot. We really were in there. I mean, it was challenging in that it was so small. But there was something nice about it. And that room where Marcola gives him his first deal is the room.
Well, thank you very much for the time.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.
I appreciate
it was a lot of fun. Jobs in theaters
August 16th.
Don't forget.